This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top questions and struggles. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to think to get the energy and the vitality that you want in this second and better half. My guest today is Vicki Hunter, who coaches athletes of all levels and abilities, but is particularly attuned to the needs of ultra runners. And we'll get into that and define it in a minute. She qualified for the 1988 Olympic Marathon Trials in a time of 2 hours, 49 minutes, and 24 seconds at the 1987 Twin Cities Marathon. She's run the Pikes Peak Marathon a total of 12 times, placing as high as third overall female. She still competes in races ranging from 5K to 50 miles. Vicki, and that's yes in one day, folks, Vicki holds her PhD in political science and is now retired from CU, where she taught for 23 years. She teaches several classes at RallySport in Boulder, Colorado, including deep water running, running drills, and foundation training. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Her approach in all of her classes and instruction is to apply the principles of foundation training to find the most efficient movement possible. In addition, she's available for private foundation instruction and coaching. What a unique background. And I'll tell you a little bit more before I actually say my hello to Vicki, who's waiting in the green room, by the way. But she's here uniquely because she is actually flipping 50 herself. We'll talk about her reveal of age on the birthday candle scene in a second, but she's also turning around, kind of reaching a hand back and helping other people move better through all ages. But I can say from having watched her deep water running class, it's amazing, and if you think you're too old or it's a granny's class to get in that water, I can tell you you're absolutely wrong. So we'll have to talk about that. Vicki, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Deborah. This is really exciting for me.
Well, okay, so let's dive right in. So everybody knows listener-wise, and let me tell you this, listeners, Vicki, if you're on Instagram, anybody who's listening, or I don't know that I've shared to my Facebook page. So Instagram at Flipping 50 TV is the place to go. Vicki has legs for TV, not for radio. So I watched her and I was so distracted. I watched her teaching deep water running. I was like, if that's how I get those legs, I'm getting in that pool. I'm doing it. So how old are you?
I am 56.
And okay, so here's the big question, really. How old do you feel, or young?
It's interesting when I think about how old I feel. In so many ways, I feel the best I've ever felt, even before I had children. And I was very active even before I had children. It's hard for me to put a number on it because I feel like the number is so artificial. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I was very active, but I was injured all the time. So now I'm not injured, but, there's other things I need to recover more than I did when I was in my 20s. So for me, it's very challenging to put an actual number on
Absolutely.
how I feel.
I love that answer. And I would have to say, if I could give you a badge, I would give it to you. I think that's the best answer I've ever had, because I think that's a challenging, and maybe I should say it's a poor question from your interviewer, but it is. I do agree that the hope, I think, is that the light bulb goes on and you're thinking, well, I might feel like I was 40, but what does that feel like? And I'm hoping that as we get older, 60 doesn't feel like we thought it would. 70 doesn't feel like we thought it would, right? And we're changing the game. So,
well, yeah, for me, it's frustrating when people focus on that number and don't think about kind of what's going on inside. And to me, I feel more aware, more alive in some ways than I did when I was younger, because, again, I feel like I've grown so much spiritually. So, when you balance all those things out, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, I feel younger now than I did when I was in my 20s. At least I'm more enlightened, I'd like to think. physically the body changes. I mean, there's no question about it. And you have to kind of adjust with those changes. Mm-hmm. But if you try and attach a number to it, to me, that does not make sense. It just doesn't work. And I think we have to adapt to where we are in all of those realms and hopefully grow in all of those realms. It's going to change as we age and hopefully for the better. To me, I think I know more now than I did when I was younger. So I feel better about how I'm living my life. Let's put it that way.
Love that. I love that. And as Vicki is here, and she's a part of the Summer Inspire series because of all she's doing and what she's doing, how she's doing it. But when you commented about, growing spiritually, and I know just in responding back and forth to questions, you mentioned that more than once. I have a question for you because I've always had a theory about runners and especially those runners who run maybe a little bit more long distance. And I'm not talking 50 miles necessarily because I have no idea what that's like. I wish I could, but not sure I'm going to get there. But is that very connected for you, the spirituality and the long distance running?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, for me, running long distances has always been a way to get in touch with nature and who I am and the world. And my spiritual side. But, I started running at a pretty young age. I was 14 when I first started running. And, for me, it was almost an immediate feeling of peace that I got from doing distance running. At the time when I was 14, distance meant 2 miles. Mm-hmm. But the way it made me feel was very grounded. It helped me to deal with the depression that my mother had, to be honest. And so there was a sense of sadness in my household that I found out when I started running that I didn't have to feel that way. So for me, it very quickly connected me to a side of myself that I wanted more of. And, I became an ultra runner later on in life, but I had always felt a pull towards that longer distance running. And it was very much spiritual. I have to say that running, I think there is something true about having, there's the addiction side of it. And when runners there's something that happens, I think, with runners. When you start running longer distances, you want more and more of that because it does make you feel good. Mm-hmm. But it can lead to an unhealthy lifestyle as well if you run through injuries, which I know a lot of runners do. And that's why I've been such a fan of cross training. And that's why I do the deep water running. And I have done for a long time. I started that because I got injured. And it was back in my 20s. And I was training for a marathon. And, I was I didn't know that much about training. And I overdid it. And I had imbalances. I started water running at the advice of a massage therapist I knew. And back then, no one was doing it. So it was something I kind of had to find on my own and figure out how to do it. But it quickly saved me. And I figured out that if I water ran, even when I wasn't injured, I could prevent, further overuse injuries. So I am someone who loves to run, but also recognizes that there has to be a balance. You can't keep running just to find that, that high, that elusive high that you find the longer and faster you run.
I love that. I love that you've said all of that and brought up the addiction. But first of all, from where you started, the realizing that was your connection to, there is a different place to be than, depression. It doesn't have to be. It's not an automatic, even though it might have been genetics. Yeah. But, your environment, you just proved you can change and change the results.
Yeah, I honestly think, part of the human condition is that we're all seeking some sort of relief from the very act of being human. I mean, humanity and being on this planet means you're going to experience pain at some level, whether it be physical, emotional. I'm just going to say that, physical or emotional. We all experience some sort of pain in our lifetimes and finding different ways. I mean, some people resort to drugs. Some people resort to overworking. Some people use food. Some people use exercise. I mean, in Boulder, we know a lot of people use exercise. And I think exercise is a great way to deal with your emotions, as long as you do it mindfully and you figure out something that works for you and something that is balanced. I know that in times during my life, I have not been in balance around it. And I've had to, deal with those repercussions. So, yeah.
I totally understand that. When I was in an undergrad and then in grad school, I actually thought seriously about going back to school, which I did, but I ended up in exercise psychology. And I wanted to go and study with William Morgan in Wisconsin because he was actually researching positive and negative addiction in runners. Yeah. And my major professor was like, no, no, no. She's like, yes, you have the tendency or temptation to become addicted, but you're not going to study that and turn it into a thesis.
Oh, interesting. Well, it's funny because I am fascinated by this subject personally. And also as I age and realize how much, I don't know if I want to say I am still in the addict phase of my running, because I am able to back off if I feel like I need to. At the same time, there is something that happens. I don't know that I feel the same thing from other forms of exercise that I feel when I run. And I've talked to other runners about that.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in that. I've been injured several times in my life, and I've had to deal with the repercussions of that and how to handle recovery. The first big accident I had was when I was pregnant with my first child. I was 36 years old, and I was in a very bad car accident. And she was in me, and I broke almost every bone in my body. And the recovery from that was very challenging. And I didn't know if I'd ever walk, let alone run again. And I was able to recover from it. All the bones healed. I had her on her due date. My recovery was pretty spectacular, but
okay, so I'm going to be hung up on this if you don't answer this. Did you go C-section, or were you able to have?
I did have C-section. I did.
Okay.
I actually went into labor, but my full belief is that the memory of the pain was when the pain of labor started happening. My body literally just tightened up and said, "No way is that baby coming out."
Not
the
that
normal way.
No.
So I stopped progressing at 5 centimeters and ended up having a C-section.
Wow.
Yeah. But
and probably to protect you. I mean,
yes,
right? I mean, the body knows. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had broken my sacrum and my pubic symphysis. So
that wouldn't have been pretty.
That would not have been nice, So, and I had, again, the pain was pretty tremendous, but I was able to go to term with the baby, which was, to me, miraculous, because that accident happened when I was 14 weeks pregnant, and it was, horrific. But I did recover fully, and I had to, at the time, I thought I went through this spiritual transformation of when I was in the hospital. I remember saying to my friends, if I never run again, I'll be fine. I just want a healthy baby. Well, as soon as she was born, and as soon as I was healthy again, that went out the window. I mean, I was running again as much and as often as I could, because it fed me in a way that nothing else did. And, being a new parent is very stressful, and running was a release for me, and it still is, but I think I do have a better understanding of why I run, why I need it, and how to balance it now than I did back then.
You've just given us, though, such an amazing story for any age, but the amazing human body, what it can do and how it can heal.
It is absolutely phenomenal to me. And, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but for me, foundation training, and the reason I am so passionate about it is precisely about that. It's precisely what the body itself can do to heal itself. So
let's talk about this.
Sure.
Let's officially decide we're talking about it. So this is, just for listeners, this is kind of a branded type of methodology to working, as you might with a physical trainer or a coach. So, Vicki, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
Distinguish it.
Okay, I will. So foundation training was developed and then really invented by a doctor, Eric Goodman. He's a chiropractor. And while he was in chiropractic school, he was in tremendous back pain. He had degenerative discs and all sorts of problems. And the doctors were telling him he needed surgery. And he said to himself, how can I pretend to help people in back pain if I can't help myself? So he started doing a lot of research, developed this over years. I mean, he started probably, I want to say 15 years ago, really delving into this work. And about 8 years ago, branded foundation training and developed a series of postures designed to help the body move the way it was meant to move. And of course, he's a chiropractor, so he studied the spine and he knows how we're supposed to move. And all of these postures can be done really by anybody. It starts with breath work. So even if you're in a lot of pain, what I found was that I do work with clients who really struggle to even move or stand without pain. But by learning how to breathe properly, you can start to alleviate some of the symptoms of compression that happens from just everyday life, gravity pushing down on us. And all of these postures were developed to fight that gravity and decompress our bodies.
I love it.
Yeah. It's amazing stuff. I can't even begin to tell you how much I think it works. And it's very subtle work in that it kind of looks like yoga, and you can look at someone doing it and think, wow, they're not doing much. But it's all about the coming from the inside out. So a lot of times when we're injured, we go to a practitioner. We go to a massage therapist. We go to an acupuncturist. We go to a doctor.
Fix me.
Yeah, fix me. And I do all of those things. I go to for massage regularly. But in order to really fix ourselves, we need to, I think, learn how to do it ourselves. So these postures help you to move your own tissue. And it's very effective, very powerful work.
All right. Now, Vicki, you're in Boulder, Colorado.
Yes.
So anybody local, we're going to let them know how to connect with you via RallySport in the show notes. Tell me this. Is there a site for practitioners who are trained in foundation if listeners are somewhere else in the country?
Yes. In fact, I think I have it right here. So they can Google foundation training, and it is, they might find like some, I don't know, imitators, but the foundation training, it's based in California, and there is an actual website. All they have to do is Google, and Eric Goodman is the founder of it. So if they look him up, they will find the website, and I don't have it right here, but we can list it.
That's okay. Yeah. So I'll do all the homework. If you're listening,
and they can do that. And there's actually free videos on his website. I highly encourage people to look on the instructor part of the website and find someone who is an actual certified instructor to go to a class and find out how to really do the work, because you can watch the videos, but there's a lot of subtle movements to it that you won't get from just watching the videos. So finding a certified instructor is really important.
Love it. Love it. So that seems to me to be so well connected to really everything that you're doing. And, it's kind of like you've got a yin yang thing going on. I mean, long distance running. I mean, we're talking really long, right? So 50 miles is a heck of a long time. And so that's really an extreme. And then you've got this coming back to the basics. So I'm pointing out to listeners, I hope you're getting this, that, you don't just advance, but then never revisit, the foundation. You may have built the house, but you still got to make sure there's no leaks, right? Coming in the basement.
Yeah, 100%. And, for me also, I think it is about finding the balance. And for everyone, that's going to look a little bit different. So I know a lot of people who love yoga and it works for them. And I highly encourage them to do yoga, and then go ride their bike or whatever it is that they want to do, that moves their body aerobically. But I think if you don't try and put together a balanced program, it's going to be imbalanced. I mean, even people who just do yoga, they are going to get certain manifestations, whether it's injuries or, overuse things that come from just doing that one thing. And I really believe that we have to find the balance between all different modalities. So going and getting massage and treating yourself to a massage is I think it should be mandatory. I think everyone should have someone else touch their body.
And you heard it here, everybody. So Vicki's going to write a note.
I mean, honestly, it's not a luxury. That is something we all need as human beings. But at the same time, you need to know how to take care of yourself. So that's where a practice like foundation training can come into play, because it's something you can do to heal your own tissue. So I think it's basically you have to find a recipe that works for you and put together a plan.
So great. And it may change, right? It'll evolve.
Well, it's interesting because, I know you've mentioned that I do 50-mile races, and I do 50-mile races. I have done a number of them, probably 25 at least in my lifetime. As I am approaching 60, I'm at the second half of my 50s. It's not something, I'll be honest, that I'm sure I'm going to do again, because my body is starting to tell me that I need to possibly take a different track. And 50 miles is on the extreme end of things. The last few races I've done, Deborah, have been 5Ks, 3 miles. And to me, they're just as satisfying as running 50 miles, because it challenges my body in a different way. It's a very focused, you have to be really focused to do it, and to do it well. And I like that as much as I like running the super long distances. As I age, I'm recognizing that I want to spend the hours I have left on this planet doing a lot of different things. I don't want to be just running or just doing one thing. I want to do a lot of different things. And I think that's the beauty of aging, and recognizing that nothing stays the same. And we don't have to be who we were in our 20s and 30s and 40s. Once we turn 50, I think we have a whole new, like a whole plate out in front of us that we can put on it whatever we want. It doesn't have to be the same ingredients. And I think that's what's exciting for me.
That is exciting. And I love that you said that. And so that's a great segue into, I want to talk about recovery, because you mentioned that right from the very beginning. Yes. And there was a piece in my book and a piece in Joe Friel's book, who also wrote Fast After 50. But before we dive into that, I want to ask you this personal question. It kind of comes back to your long running and spirituality. And as a university instructor in kinesiology for years, I would teach lectures, and I would also do the labs. So students were learning physiology, and they were their own guinea pig.
Right.
I was hardcore. I would never let them use iPods. I wanted them to be intrinsically motivated. Right. I wanted them to be
right.
So I'm dying to know, did you ever use an iPod?
Yes. And I still occasionally do. I have to say that I don't, I prefer, if I'm out on a long run, I'll give you an example. This past Sunday, I actually did one of the longer runs I've done this summer. I am training for a marathon later this summer, and it was quite long. So part of it was on the road and part of it was on trail. And when I was on the road, I did have an iPod with me, and I listened to music for about a half an hour. And then I was on trail and I turned it off, because I really do like to be connected when I'm running.
And because of bears.
Well, that's another thing to mention. Yes. Of course, I wasn't actually thinking about that, but it's more, I like to hear my footsteps in the woods. I like to be aware of my surroundings. I wasn't necessarily thinking about the animals, but that's a good reason to not have the iPod on. And I have used it over time. I never use it in races, ever. Because for me, and it's interesting because I was talking to my water running class about this last week, that the more you can tune into what your body's doing, your muscles actually respond better. If you focus on what the movement is, the actual movement is more efficient and effective. So typically, I do not use an iPod. But on long, long runs, I occasionally will have it with me, and for a distraction, I will. But I don't believe that it actually helps me to run better.
Love that.
It's more, it helps the time go by a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Satisfied my curiosity. Thank you. Okay. Now, next time when you come back, we'll talk about your playlist. But right now, let's dive into recovery. And you said this right away, that you notice you need to take a little bit more recovery time, or you do it, knowing that you need it. So let's talk about how water exercise fits right into that, because it is so true that, we may or may not be able to do the same intensity or duration or frequency that we did younger, but the potential is there.
Yes.
And we do know from science, though, that what needs to be there is a longer recovered period.
Absolutely. So I have noticed that, it's interesting. I would say I've really noticed a big difference in just the last year. When I turned 55, something shifted. Before that, I was still able to do my typical week of running involves a long run on Sunday, typically a recovery day on Monday, and then Tuesday would be a hard workout, meaning hills or going to the track. And I found that this year I can no longer do that. I need to wait until Wednesday at the earliest to do a hard workout. So Tuesday becomes another recovery day. And that was not the case until, fairly recently. And then what I do after all of my hard workouts is I always get in the pool, whether it's to swim a few laps or water run, strictly as recovery, not as a workout, but just to move my body and let the tissue kind of relax and the lactic acid through and all sorts of things happen physiologically, which I will be honest, I can't describe all of those at the scientific level, but from a feeling state, I know how I feel after a hard workout if I do not get in the water. My tissue just stays very tight. If I get in the pool, it all goes away. And I typically feel fine the next day. My husband is always saying to me, how come you're never sore? He does my hard workouts with me. He's sore invariably. And I have to say, I do not remember the last time I felt sore after a workout.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So I'm going to back you up just for a second. Sure. So for listeners, just to clarify, so when you say, now you used to do that tough workout, so long after the last one, but you now can't do that anymore. What were the signs that you can't do that? Was the performance off? You just didn't want to go? What was it?
Fatigue. It's mostly fatigue. Like when I wake up in the morning, I am a get up and go kind of person. I typically wake up and I'm ready to get out of bed and go. But when I am tired, there's just a sluggish feeling of, I can't just get up and go do what I, had on my agenda. It takes me a little bit more time to get ready and get going in the morning. So it's more of a fatigue factor. It's not soreness. And then typically if I start running, I've been running for so many years that I can ease into a run and start feeling better. Pretty much always. But what I'm feeling on those days when I would go for a hard workout, now I can't because I still feel a little bit tired a mile into the run. So I know that I just have to keep going easy and maybe cut the run a little bit short and take a recovery day versus going and trying to do track intervals on that particular day. So it's mostly a fatigue that I notice, and it's kind of a heaviness that you feel. And I think it's for each body, it's going to be slightly different. You have to start getting in touch with how you feel when you feel good, and then you'll notice how you feel when you're not feeling that way. So
I love that.
It's either you have a spring in your legs or you don't. Yeah. Now, one more thing, when you're marathon training, like I am right now, there's going to be a certain level of fatigue. I mean, you're training for a longer distance, there's going to be fatigue. And when triathletes or whatever, if you're doing a lot of aerobic activity, there's going to be some fatigue, even if you take rest days. because the volume is fairly high. But you have to notice if that is excessive fatigue. If you can't get through a workout, if you go to the track and your times are typically a certain time and then you're not hitting those times, then you know you're fatigued. If you do your normal 5-mile loop in a certain amount of time and all of a sudden you're 5 minutes slower, something's going on. I think
great tips.
Yeah.
And I think for women listening, this is really important because there is a fine line. And if you're using social media as your, temperature and your gauge, you're going to be reading a meme today somewhere that says, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
And that says, pain is weakness leaving your body and you should go and every day and you'll never be sorry you did a workout. But then there is, adrenal fatigue.
Right.
So that kind of fatigue is different, and it is definitely playing off of know yourself.
Yes.
Listen if you feel like you have a hangover and you don't remember having the fun, that might be a good time to start testing. Put one more rest day in.
Yeah, I think it's really about an internal listening that comes over time. I mean, I'm lucky because I've been an endurance athlete for most of my life. So I definitely am in touch with the signs, my personal signs. As you age, though, I've had to become even more in tune. And sometimes it's interesting because sometimes I will ask myself, oh, I'm just being, a wuss. I mean, why aren't I just going out and doing my workout when I feel like this? But you have to kind of balance it out. Sometimes you go out and you feel better once you've done the workout. But sometimes it really is a matter of giving yourself a break and saying, maybe I don't need to run today. Maybe I'm going to go swim, or maybe I'm just going to take the day off, or maybe I need more fuel, or it could be so many different things, or more sleep. I mean, I'm pretty adamant about getting the sleep I need. I mean, I go to bed pretty much the same time every night, and I do well on 7 hours of sleep. And as long as I get that consistently, I'm good. So I think you have to kind of pay attention. Like if you're having a hard time sleeping, what is that telling you? If you're waking up in the morning, you can't get out of bed, that tells you something. Yeah.
Right. And then you throw the hormone wrench in, and that can become, a challenge because there's that dance, not only with, okay, now I'm trying to work out more regularly. I'm trying to listen to my recovery needs, but then how do I know if this is, adrenal fatigue or cortisol talking to me? And there is a little bit of a dance going on that you've got to consider. So Vicki, I think we could talk all day, and I've got some more I want to open up with you, but just for time's sake, we're going to start wrapping it up. But this is my favorite question, actually, because this takes so much of the pressure off me. So is there a question that you wish I would have asked you, knowing that our goal here is to inspire, maybe pivot for somebody in their thoughts about what's possible? Is there a question I should have asked you?
Let me think. I guess the only thing that I'm not sure if I can put it in question form, that I think, well, I guess that if you could have pursued one line of questioning, it would be, that the car accident was so pivotal in my life. It changed everything for me. And so a follow-up question to that, how I came back from that, and what my pre-accident life is almost a separate life to my post-accident life. And it did affect me in such a fundamental way. Before the accident, for one thing, I wasn't a parent. I mean, I was a parent to be. And so raising children after the accident and how that affected my athletic life and my competitive life. And then to now, where I have grown children, and how you balance all of those things. How do you balance being a parent, being a wife, being an athlete? It's quite a balancing act. And I think that's something I feel I've done a good job at. I think that at times it has been a huge challenge to figure that puzzle out. It's a puzzle, and it's always changing, always evolving. And I think if we recognize that, we can kind of go with the flow a little bit more. I wish I had been able to go with the flow at times a little bit better than I did. I think I'm starting to get there, but it's a challenge. So that's the only thing I would have pursued.
So well said.
Oh,
all right. So now we have content. We have a reason to bring you back. And I love it.
Well, that's great. So, there's a lot even the whole adrenal thing, I have so much to add on that. So we can keep talking for sure.
Amazing. All right. Vicki, thanks so much for being here. And listeners, now it's your turn. If you have a question you wish I would have asked Vicki, leave it below the show link at flipping50.com. That's all spelled out. No numbers, no spaces. I love hearing from you. And if this episode was helpful, please leave a rating in iTunes and then share it with a friend so you can surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. To get the most from this week's episode, check out today's show notes at flipping50.com/podcast, where you'll find the juicy free downloads today, the links to different resources, how to connect with Vicki, foundation training, and anything else we've mentioned on the show. Let's start flipping 50 together.